Good evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of Grumpy Old Spurs. You got me hosting Gibbo, my usual co-host Dave, and tonight we've got a special guest. One I've really been looking forward to having on, the author of two books about Spurs, one in the 90s and now a prequel in the 80s. It's Gareth Dace. Gareth, welcome to the show. Your book was released in September, I believe. How's it been received?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's I've had some really nice comments so far. It's been out just less than a month at the moment, so I've been obsessively tracking it on the Amazon list and seeing where it is in the Spurs list. Unfortunately, the club have just released their 2026 annual, which always goes right to the top, so it's very difficult to get it off there. But yeah, so far so good.
Dave, obviously you've done the first part of this show with Gareth a while back. Have you finished all the book yet, Dave? I bet you did it in a weekend, didn't you?
I haven't got my copy yet, no, but I will be reading it for sure.
You haven't received your copy yet?
No, I haven't received my copy yet. No, I'll tell you something though. When I got the 90s book, and I don't think Gareth has got anything to do with this, I got $100 wine voucher from the delivery company as well. So nice one, Gareth, because I got a couple of nice bottles of vino of that. I was delighted. So I don't know if that's part of the deal. I know it's got nothing to do with you, but if that can be part of the deal when I order my book, that would be absolutely fantastic. But I haven't. Go on.
I said nothing to do with me, but you will need $100 worth of wine to read some of those 90s seasons back again.
Yeah, and also a bottle of gin as well. Particularly as I've always said about that 90s book, which is a great book, and if anyone hasn't read it, I recommend you read it. The two seasons where you start with 96 and end in 98. Those are two shocking back-to-back seasons. They really are. But anyway, I think just in terms of kind of this is obviously the part two, and we had Gareth on whilst Gibbo was away in the US. So we did cover off some really good bits like the 81-82 Cup finals, the 84 UEFA Cup. We talked about Mr. Scholar, the General, Hoddle, Waddle, Gaza. And so I'm really keen tonight. Any questions or comments you want to talk about in the comment section, please do. Any of your 80s memories. So we are going to cover off different parts of the 80s in this show tonight. And I think... given that you weren't here for the part one, Gibbo, if I said to you the 1980s of Tottenham, what stands out for you about Tottenham? Who was your favourite player?
Well, like we were talking about this before, and I assume we'll cover this off in this series. But I started supporting Spurs in about 1987. Everybody, obviously, as a lot of people know here, I'm from the Midlands, a small town in the West Midlands. Everybody around here supported either Villa. But back then, most people supported Liverpool because they were the team that won everything. And I can just remember coming in one Sunday and Spurs were playing Arsenal on, what would it have been called then, Dave, on a Sunday afternoon? Was it the big match? It was just like a Barclays Division 1 game. ITV? Yeah, on ITV.
So you'd have had Central Television, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we'd have had Central, yeah. So,
yeah.
And I just remember watching Spurs playing. I can remember seeing Waddle playing, and he had like the mullet and just the way he played and the way he looked. And there was another lad who I'd made friends with at school, and he was like the only Tottenham Hotspur fan in the school. So for some reason, I saw him play. I liked the kit. I saw Waddle playing. And I just thought, I'll have a bit of that. And they were scoring lots of goals because then you get your match magazine and then you start taking a bit more interest in their scoring goals and they seem to be winning games and they seem to be fun. And they're obviously going to the FA Cup final, which was a big deal then. So, and that was the year that really got me. And my first sort of Spurs crush was sort of like Chris Waddle. And obviously, Diamond Lights came out around that time as well. So
did you buy that? Did you buy that, Gibbo?
Well, I didn't buy it myself. Somebody bought it for me, but yeah, I did get it.
And how does Diamond Light stand up in relation to the Lighthouse family?
I think it probably trumps the Lighthouse family, doesn't it, Dave? I mean, Glenn Hoddle's got a decent voice on him, hasn't he? He was on the Masked Singer and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it definitely stands up to the test of time. But Gareth doesn't really want to talk about Diamond Lights, does he? He wants to get into the nitty gritty of the football around that time, Dave. So yeah, that was me. And first ever game
and your favourite player,
really watched was an FA Cup final loss. Our first ever FA Cup final loss.
So it's your fault we lost our first FA Cup.
All my fault.
Right. We'll get into that season in a minute, but one last question to you, Gibbo, before we dive into that Pleat season. Who was your favourite player of the 80s?
Well, I probably would say I'll go for Chris Waddle. You know, like I did once I got into Spurs, I started borrowing videos off people of old seasons and stuff like that. But there was just something about Chris Waddle, just the way he played, the way he was. I know he didn't last that much longer after I started supporting him, but I just enjoyed watching videos of him playing. And I sort of liked him after. I liked him when he was playing for England, when he came back and went to Sheffield Wednesday. And I thought he was still a good player then. I still enjoyed watching him. So I'll say Chris Waddle.
Okay. So let me just get this right here. So the first game you watched was the cup final that we lost. And then you're saying that your favourite player didn't last very much longer after you decided he was your favourite player. Is there a pattern emerging here?
Yeah, I'm just a bringer of doom, aren't I? I've just literally, the minute I started supporting them, I just jinxed the club. It's all my fault, Dave.
And look at you now, the co-host of Grumpy Old Spurs. Well done. Yeah. Right, so let's get... It's written in the stars. So let's get into the 86-87 season, the Pleat season. So Gareth, in terms of the book, who did you talk to? What players did you manage to talk to? Any players or anyone around the club for that particular chapter?
Yeah, I did. So I spoke to Clive Allen, who's one of the stars of the season, 49 goals, star of the season. Who did I speak to? Vinny Samway's only played once at the back end of that season. I did speak to him for the book. Maybe he didn't give me too much season. Yeah, it was Everton, wasn't it? Or was it Forest towards the end of the season?
I think it might have been Forest,
Yeah, that's right. His debut was against Forest. He then played against Everton, which was a game we played just immediately before the cup final when a lot of players were rested and Everton won the title. I were awarded the trophy that day. Anyway, the 86-87 team, it's one that I'm personally not scarred by. So my first-hand memories of Spurs are, a couple of years after that. So I've got very vague memories of my dad, who he certainly wasn't a passionate Spurs fan by any means by that time. But I can remember him having watched the final, just talking me through the chronology of the goals and that Spurs had lost, and I was probably disappointed because I think I knew that Spurs were my team, but it didn't have any impact on me emotionally at that point. But I'm obviously very, very familiar with that game since then. But what an incredible season it must have been. It's such bittersweet memories for, I guess, so many of, and you two, I'm sure, will share these memories, that it's just a season that could have had. It absolutely could have had it all. Probably we wasn't really a title challenge. We were third for a while and maybe in with a sniff, but it was always the cups, wasn't it? We went to the latter stages of, and in both heartbreaking exits to both domestic cup competitions for that season.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've just been I've just gone back and I'm still traumatized. I had my kind of mid-Depeche Mode period. Dave gone. Shaved at the back sides and a little pointy tip at the front. I had my black suede shoes that I wore to school, my white toweling socks when I could get
nice.
I look cool as. And of course, my Pierre Cardin top, which I went and saw level 42 at Wembley Arena, Soul Boy for the night. But on the football front, I'm interested to know, actually, what was in the chapter. Did anyone that you spoke to, did they talk about Pleat in terms of, was he considered a genius, and I have an alternate view, but I'm interested to know how was Pleat viewed, Gareth?
Yeah, well, Clive Allen very, very favourably remembers David Pleat. They've gone on to work with each other subsequently, but I've heard different accounts of that famous meeting they had before we played the away game at Oxford when Pleat said they were going to play 4-5-1. And from what I can work out, Ray Clements was one of the players who was quite sceptical about it because he had talked about a time they tried it at Liverpool and it didn't last very long and they went back to their old system. But Clive Allen, he puts down so much of his success to that system and the fact that although he was the only striker that the ball put on the plate for him by both Hoddle and Waddle in particular was the making of him that season. So he is very, very positive. And he says, no, it was David Pleat said, I want us to play this way, and really insisted that the players did it despite the scepticism from several senior players.
Yeah, I mean, I think the theory at the time is obviously we just had the 1986 World Cup and Belgium got to the semi-finals. And I'm pretty sure they played 4-5-1. And up top for them was Nico Klassen, who we bought, right? Now, I always liked Nico Klassen, and I think he was bought to play up top, right? And he never really, obviously, didn't get the chance to do so because you've got Clive Allen banging in 49 goals. And the thing about, I'm obviously, Clive Allen would be very grateful in order to, someone can put together a midfield behind him of RD-Les, Hoddle and Waddle, right?
Galvin.
No, Galvin didn't play that much because he bought Steve Hodge. So Galvin was
in that squad, wasn't he?
He was in the squad, but that was the beginning of the end for him because it's an interesting point you've raised because what I read in is it the Boys from White Hart Lane is that basically Pleat said to Roberts, Falco, who else was there? Miller, Roberts, Falco, Galvin. He basically was intimating to them that he was going to get rid of all of them at the start. And I think if you talk to someone like Graham Roberts, he is very, very uncomplimentary about Pleat. And I think that, and the interesting thing about Clive Allen is he got 49 goals. I remember he missed some utter sitters in the first leg of the League Cup at the Library, and we should have put them out of sight in the first leg. And then, of course, we had that cruel heartbreak in the replay when we were leading the whole tie over 3 games up until the last 8 minutes. And I think it was Ian Allinson who'd come on and he'd scored the equaliser, and then we just fell apart. And so that was the first, in the style of Grumpy Old Spurs, was the first bone-crushing night. I went home with my cousin. He put on LBC and people were ringing up going, what a great advert for the game it was and how exciting. And I'm sat there going, no, it fucking wasn't. And obviously, I'm at school in Hertfordshire where you've got some Watford fans. You've also got some Luton fans. And let's give props to Jack Wilshere, their new coach, who's just been appointed. And then you had Tottenham and Arsenal, and you had one person who's quite famous in the record industry who started his school career as a Tottenham fan and ended it as an Arsenal fan. It's not very good, is it? So we had all the Arsenal fans next day at school, all with their red and white scarves. And you can't hide in circumstances like that. And so that was awful. And then the following weekend, very sadly, was the Zeebrugge Bury tragedy. And we played QPR, and the atmosphere at the Lane, it was just, people were still in shock. And very sadly that day, Danny Thomas had his career-ending tackle from Gavin Maguire. I'll never forget that. So sorry, I'm going through the trauma here. Sorry, gents. And then we get to the 87 Cup final. So the 1987 Cup final, so Gibbo, that's not the first Cup final you ever watched as a kid, was it?
No, the first I can always remember. I think the first one I ever sort of paid attention to was Liverpool Everton.
86.
What would that have been? 86.
Yeah.
That's the 86. First one I can remember. Rush, the shot that hit the camera in the back and everything. Yeah, that was Bobby it. Mims. Like I said, everybody was a Liverpool fan round by us. So my dad was a West Brom fan. Story about the 87 Cup final. We watched it in my nan's, and I can remember my dad. Obviously, I was very new Tottenham supporter. My dad was a West Brom fan. God rest his soul. He tried to get me to support West Brom, and I can just remember him cheering when Coventry scored. Because my dad was from the Black Country. Yeah, he cheered when I'll never forget how loud he cheered when Dave Bennett scored.
But and he's a West Brom fan, and
Well, because he wanted a. My dad was a West Brom fan. He liked football, but he was never sort of like, he was never really anti-Wolves, or he was. And later on in life, I used to get him tickets, and he used to come with me to watch Spurs because he liked watching David Ginola. He thought he was a brilliant player. So obviously Coventry are a team that are about, from where we live, 45, 50
Not
minutes
far.
away. So it's like a local, like a Midlands team. So he wanted them to win. He preferred the Midlands team to win. I can just remember it. And I'm sort of sat there thinking, hang on, whose side you on here? Obviously not mine at that point. But yeah, that's one of my memories of that game as well. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in fairness, I'm sure that you cheered when Laurie Sanchez scored for Wimbledon against Liverpool the year after, isn't it? So it's everyone loves the underdog.
Yeah, of course they do. And I just remember then, and obviously it's changed. The FA Cup was a massive deal then, wasn't it? Like after the FA Cup, even though Spurs lost that game, I can, back home after everybody outside playing football, pretending they were the players from the FA Cup final and stuff.
Did you watch Swap Shot before in the morning? Was it FA Cup Swap Shot?
I can't remember that, Dave. I can only remember the FA Cup final that day, and I can remember, how they did all the team bus going to the stadium and talking to players and breakfast and all that. So that was the first time, So good season. And I wanted to ask Gareth. One thing I wanted to ask Gareth, as it comes up, obviously we were talking about favourite players, but I can always remember I can remember having a poster in my Match magazine of Richard Gough that season. How, like in that chapter, did you speak to it? Because I always thought he was like, he always seemed to me when I saw him, and I only saw him very few times for Tottenham, but like some sort of like godlike centre back. Do you know what I mean?
No, very much so.
Rangers. So did anybody you speak to, did you ever have the talk about Richard Gough? Because obviously then we sort of like bought him and sold him for a profit, didn't we? Pretty quick.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which wasn't the intention. I mean, interestingly, David Pleat wanted to sign Terry Butcher at the start of that season. And Scholar, it was really who convinced him that actually we should sign Richard Gough instead because he's much younger and it's better investment. Yeah. Which was ultimately
resale value.
Resale value. But yeah, I mean, Gough is described as, I think by our mutual friend David, Jason McGovern, who I interviewed, who comments on Richard Gough in the book. Yeah. He describes him as a Rolls Royce of a defender, but I think he was that. He was an absolute colossus. He's that big, classy central defender that we've had a number of over the years. If you go sort of right back to Mike England in the 70s and Robertson Miller at the start of the 80s. And I suppose Ruddock was as close as we got that into the 90s, but we only had him for a season, like Richard Gough actually. But he was he was obviously such an important defender. Probably from what I've been told, Richard Gough's only sort of suboptimal performance that season was the cup final when I think Cyril Regis got the better of him, which Cyril Regis had a great day. And that's really what I found out about that final. It was just meant to be, I think, for Coventry that day. Just how the wind sailed on the day. It was their day, and probably you play that game 10 times in those circumstances. It was always destined to be their day.
But they beat us in the league, hadn't they, that season?
They'd beaten us 4-3 at Highfield Road, I think maybe just around Christmas time.
Yeah, it was. Yes, I think the thing that Pleat said is that Regis bullied Gough, and he says that Brian Kilcline should have been sent off for a shocking tackle. And so my thing about Pleat is that he didn't win us the big moments, right, in that season. He didn't win us the big moments. There we go, Kerry. Hello, Kerry.
Yes,
I got Royal Rovers. I got Royal Rovers, Match Weekly, and Shoot.
Shoot is still around today.
Is it?
Yeah. So I think the thing is that basically at Christmas time he got rid of Graham Roberts in order to fund the transfer to buy Steve Hodge, right? So you had Hodge on the left, you had Dave Bennett marauding down the right wing, and he was up against Mitchell Thomas, who I believe Pleat likened to Cafu when he bought him, right? And so Thomas was shocking, and Hoddle was outmarked by Lloyd McGrath. This is Hoddle's last game. This was my childhood hero's last game. And as I walked back down Wembley Way with my cousin, I said, bridesmaids, bridesmaids, we're bridesmaids. I'd seen the Gooners win the League Cup the first time that Ian Rush scored a goal and not one. Remember that? And Charlie Nicholas gets 2 goals, so that all the red and white scarves are out. And then on the Monday at school, everyone's singing the Sky Blues song, which is their cup final song. And we had not won anything. And I said, and I'm sorry about this, I said, Hoddle can go, he's rubbish. I reacted very badly as a 15-year-old to it. And I think Pleat, if he'd have had Roberts there, I think Roberts would have closed out one of those, that semi-final, the final, and we'd have won it. That's my unpopular opinion. I doubt anyone criticised Pleat in your book, did they, Gareth?
Did they? Well, look, I'm very aware of Graham Roberts' criticism. I didn't speak to Graham Roberts for the book. Partly because I didn't want to do a disservice to the boys from White Hart Lane, the book you've already referred to, and
which he slates. He's quite
unspoken in there. I was quite keen to get a balanced take on David Pleat. So yeah, it'd be disingenuous to say that everyone that I've spoken to is in full praise of Pleat. I mean, Pleat, by his own admission, says he should have spotted that Bennett was getting the better of Mitchell Thomas. You should have done something to change that earlier on. As you said, he also highlighted the challenge that Kilcline made on Gary Mabbutt, who, as we know, was a diabetic, and it was so hot that day that apparently he couldn't even feel his feet by extra time, which maybe goes on to explain the own goal that he scores at the end of it. So there's just a number of sort of almost quirky circumstances that all conspired to go against Spurs that day. One of which was that, in the moment, the manager didn't make the changes that, in hindsight, we know that we'd needed. But look, as Gary Mabbutt always says, 999 times out of 1,000, that ball comes off his knee and it goes anywhere except into that corner of the net that Clements couldn't get to, and on any one of those other 999 days he deflects it, it goes over the bar and we defend it, and either it goes to a replay and we win that, or we end up winning on the day. Sometimes it's just written in the stars, isn't it? And it always feels like that day. Easy for me to say because I wasn't there, but it feels like that was just that day when it was.
So in a moment of kind of synchronicity around the world, Gibbo, the game ends and you go out. Do you go outside to play a game of football?
Yeah, like I think probably the same as like Gareth alluded to earlier, that I wasn't happy that Spurs hadn't won, but I don't think I built up that where it hurt me as much as it obviously hurt you, Dave. Saying those nasty things about Glenn Hoddle and making you so angry. But yeah, so it didn't hurt me as much. Like, there's probably been since then, lesser games that Spurs are lost, which have really gutted me and really hurt. So I didn't have that. I sort of just knew that it was a big thing for Coventry, and that was it really. And then it's sort of like, as time's gone on and I've learnt my history and stuff like that about Spurs, you sort of realise that after we've not, we had 91 after that, which I can really remember. I was sort of in it then. And then we haven't had a lot since, have we? So you sort of, as you go back, you see the missed opportunity that it was and wish they could have won it. But yeah, at the time, mate, that was it. Sort of final whistle went. I sort of dusted myself off and was like, right, I'm off out to play now, Dad. See you later. And that's the end of it.
Stoic, Gibbo.
Yeah,
Gibbo he's stoic. He's made of firm stuff, Gareth, is Gibbo. Let me tell you.
Well,
whereas I boned my way down Wembley Way.
Believe me, you won't you? And I had my days like that. I think there's a certain age as a Spurs fan. Well, there's still Spurs fans who are my age and older who still get like that. But I think over the years now, I've become a lot more sort of like numb to it. If you say I'm sort of like a lot
syndrome,
it's Stockholm syndrome. I'm a lot more sort of like, that's it now. And my son is now 17, so at that age, he's like probably what I was then. And he tells me about all these players being ballers and all these things, how great they are. I tell him about the disappointments that I've had that have made me the way I am. But
he comes to you with shiny eyes filled with optimism, and you send him packing with disappointment tales.
Yeah, but I think and I can always remember that at some point because I do get emotional about it, but I think I used to get more emotionally sort of just annoyed at them more than the other stuff. But I can always remember a point where my wife said to me, "Look, this is what Zach's like. You can't be like this anymore. You cannot get like that." And I think from that point, I think I have sort of learned to be more like the words you use, Dave, about it. But yeah. So
yeah, but your missus was too busy in the 80s watching Home and Away, so she's obviously going to be cheerful because she sees Bobby in Summer Bay, and it's sun all the year round.
She preferred the newer Home and Away, Dave, but that's for these stories are for another day. Gareth's not.
We'll do a separate recording on the merits of Home and Away.
Aussie soap nostalgia of the 80s.
Yeah. We'll do that. Now let's move on. So basically, the bone-crushing disappointment of the 1987 Cup final is still not over. Let's move on to another big thing, which we did talk a bit about him in part one, which is Tel. Terry Venables comes in after Pleat's issues and is appointed by Scholar in his first game. Off the top of my head, I think I'm correct, it's October 87, Liverpool at home. And we at Liverpool are obviously powering through, and we have lost and in the process of losing a lot of players. So, Gibbo, what does Tel Terry Venables mean to you?
I like Tel. I always sort of I know there was all the stuff going on, but I sort of remember
not in the 80s, mate. You're going to stick to the 80s. So we came in.
I just remember. So basically, when he came in, then Dave, if you're looking about it at that time, it's like then I didn't really have a more open view on football. He was just a guy that had come in that had done well at elsewhere, QPR and the earlier on, and obviously he had his success at Barcelona's and stuff like that. So I was just sort of like, this guy's meant to be really good. You speak to like my granddad and people like that who say good things about him. So you're just taking their word for it, because back then you didn't have the sort of wealth of, your YouTubes and all your social medias where you can get knowledge about people from all over the place. It was literally newspapers, a couple of shows on the TV, and CFAX and teletext and stuff like that, wasn't it? So I just remember sort of him as a decent manager coming to Spurs, really, and then obviously the rest of it from the 90s and stuff. When I was more into it, then I've got more of an opinion on that period. So I'm quite interested to find out early doors, the story around Venables and stuff like that, and what was going on early doors with him, really.
So Gareth, you interviewed Vinny Samways for the book, right? I'm assuming you didn't mention his nickname, Vinny Sideways, and I think you also interviewed. Good idea that. And also the legend that is Guy Butters, who
top man,
he said he's a really nice guy. Did you ask them about Venables? And so, in terms of the book in that period, what were people saying?
I think, well, not so much for the book. I mean, all the players that have played for Terry Venables, I've not heard anyone, or I've not spoken to any player who isn't really affectionate about him.
I have, but we'll get on to that in a minute. Carry on.
Yeah, you're going to say Paul Walsh. I think he's a bit.
I am going to say Paul Walsh.
Paul Walsh, yeah. I think he's the only one I've ever heard of who hasn't said great things about Venables. For me, I mean, it's just the different things that people say about him. So you've got players who talk about how tactically astute he was and his attention to detail and just the minutiae that he would pick up in training that might be as little as you're making a run off the defender here. You need to make it at a slightly different angle, and it works absolutely every time. But it's just his man management skills as well. The way that he could put his arm around a player and make him feel like $1 million, and that's certainly something Guy Butters spoke to me about. He spoke as a young lad when he was called into the Venables to find out whether he'd got a pro contract, and he said he walked in there Guy and Venables said to him, "I've been watching you play. These are the players in the England under-21 who play your position. I think you're better than all of them. I'm going to make sure that you're in the England under-21s and you've played in the first team by next year." And he said he walked out of there feeling absolutely 10 feet tall. As far as he was concerned, he was just a youth team player. And now you've got this really high-profile, affable manager who's come in and sort of picked up straight away on his attributes as a player and told him what his ambitions were for him. So, Clive Allen played for him briefly. It was the season that Clive left. Clive was a family friend of the Venables, that Clive's dad, Les, had played with Terry. And I think they worked together at QPR when Les was the manager there.
That's right.
So although he only played with him for a few months, the reasons why Clive Allen, nothing to do with Terry Venables, it was to do with the contract offer that was made to him and his ambition to go out and play in France, which is the reason why Clive left. But yeah, he only said good things about Venables. I mean, to me, because I don't remember Keith Birkinshaw or Pleat as manager, Venables was manager when I first started following Spurs, and he's like your uncle that you see twice a year and sort of will take you out and get you the best ice cream, and you just remember him very, very affectionately. But
at Scribes West, so he'd take you to Scribes West and give you a lovely ice cream. He would definitely take you to
Scribes West, and then he probably would have billed Spurs for the ice cream.
For the ice cream, yes.
But no, really, everyone I've spoken to, both in the context and in the 80s and the 90s, speaks so highly of him. And he will always, for me, he'll always be the Spurs manager, because he was just the first one that I knew. And he was actually there, in relative terms, he was there for a long time. To be a manager at a club for 6 years, you think, he was manager since it has lasted that long, have they?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's about, so the thing about Venables is that he is the master of he was the master of spin. He really was, right? For example, I remember we went up to City. It was the start of the 89-90 season, and we were awful, right? And we drew 1-1, and God knows that. And he said, first half we were on top. No, we weren't, Terry. They were all over us, right? And those are the days of Paul Lake and all the rest of them. I think even Clive Allen might.
Man City had just come up, yeah.
Yeah. And we were rubbish. And there was a couple of seasons running where we started awfully. So there was, let me get this right, the 88-89 season, so there was Gazza and Paul Stewart started. We were like bottom for months.
We were literally bottom in November,
Yeah. And then even at the start of the 89-90 season, I think I remember the Chelsea coming to Tottenham with Hazard and Roberts playing for the Chelsea, and they smashed us 4-1.
Yeah, and we were lucky to get one.
And I think Fenwick got so badly booed, he scored a goal against Southend in the League Cup, and that was when we were doing Renaults on the stand, and he went and celebrated to an empty stand. And that, I think, was Fenwick Venables' first signing, or a little-known keeper called Peter Guthrie.
You're right, and I've got that in there. But Peter Guthrie was our first signing. He never played for Spurs. He was the first player signed from non-league for...
Is it Barnet, or did he get sold?
10 grand?
Did he get... Yeah, so he got bought or sold to Barnet.
He got...
other thing...
Yeah.
He liked Fenwick, didn't he?
He loved it.
He's like Nico Cranchar to Harry Redknapp. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the other thing about Venables is he did a lot of deals with his mate, David Webb. So Webb was at Chelsea when he sold us Jason Cundy, and Webb was at Southend when Austin and Edinburgh. And there's a story in the Scholar book where we won the 91 Cup final, and we played this kind of meaningless dead rubber against United at Old Trafford. Yeah. So United had just won the Cup Winners' Cup, and we'd won the FA Cup. So it's like an end of season kickabout.
Jolly.
And he played Edinburgh because it clicked an appearance thing in his contract, which meant Southend got more money. And old Scholar said he didn't have to play that night, and he knew the trouble that the club were in financially. Allegedly. But that's what, because I think did you interview Mihir Bose as well? Didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
So Mihir Bose authored the Scholar book, and Scholar's book is basically, it's everyone else's fault except for me. And he absolutely slated Venables. And
is that what it's called? It's everybody else's fault except for me.
Under the bus, you might as well have called it.
It's called Lift the Bus Up, I'm sticking under everyone. And I think Paul Walsh, if you listen to there's a great interview of him on the Spurs show. where and it's a really, really honest interview. It's fantastic. It's really good. He's very open and honest about the challenges he's had in his life and things like that. But he's not complimentary about Venables at all.
No, and he's
not at all.
And it's not to say that he's wrong. I've got a feeling that was the same interview where he said that he played down Gazza's role as well a little bit, didn't he? Or he said that it became a bit of a circus with Gazza there, and sometimes it was more of a distraction. All the antics that were going on at the training ground. So and look, that's not to say Paul Walsh is wrong for that. He's talking honestly from the heart, and that's his assessment of it. I guess you'll never please literally everybody.
No,
of course you can't.
No. So that was Zeltel. So that was it. So we've got about 20 minutes to go now, and I think just to kind of round out the conversation. So obviously you've covered a decade. I'm interested to know from your Gareth, from your perspective of obviously researching and putting the book together, and Gibbo, even though you said that you only started watching them 86, 87, but looking back on reflecting or being in the moment, I'm interested to know from the both of you, and I'm going to come to you, Gibbo, first. What do you think the best season of the 80s was? The best season?
I think sort of like on reflection, and when you see things, you'd probably look at it and say that 84 and winning the UEFA Cup would be, me looking back at it, would have been the best season. But FA Cups were massive then, and so for me, it's more about what would have been massive moments from the 80s, more so than picking whole seasons. If I had to pick a season, I'd probably pick 87 because it was the first one where I sort of started taking a bit of notice, and I sort of had that feeling for him. But like when you look back on it, and you probably look at what was more important for the club, or what was a bigger season for the club, you'd probably look at the winning a European trophy. But some people might say, well, the FA Cup in 81 was better. And, look, I know that the FA Cup was obviously a much bigger deal back then.
But for you, Gibbo, from an emotional point of view, whatever, for you is the best
I'm not very emotional, am I now, Dave? I'm sort of like in a...
Oh, I know. Sort of like, I know that.
But, yeah, I'll say 87, because that's the first season I started supporting them. I love the kit. I still love the kit. I still think it's brilliant kit. I wish Spurs would get Hummel kits now rather than Nike. I'd rather have Hummel now than Nike. I'd rather have Umbro now than Nike. But yeah, so the kit, Waddle, Hoddle, like I know there was probably better goals, but whenever I see it, the goal Hoddle scored against Oxford, where he went through, and I think you sort of look at it really and you think, as the keeper took one there just to let Hoddle score the goal, and Clive Allen scoring all that. Well, he just literally the keeper
say that again. That's as controversial comment as Xavi Simons is overhyped from 2 weeks ago.
But I hope he never. But when you look at it now, you think, what is he doing? But yeah, like the kits, the players who were playing then. Yep. I never really liked Pleat when he was the director of football at Spurs in those years. But when I listen to him talk now, and I've heard him do things on the Spurs show, and I've got his book, and I quite like listening to him. I think he comes across really well when he speaks, and he doesn't really, for want of a better word, bullshit. So yeah, probably 87. There's stuff about that I enjoy, and sort of probably more than any other season gets me. So yeah, I'd probably say 87.
And in the
86, season, 87, isn't it?
So that 86, 87 season, you're obviously listening to your favourite band at the time, 5 Star.
Systematic. I had that on 7-inch single. Yeah.
Rain or Shine. You loved a bit of Rain or Shine, didn't you?
I liked Systematic better, Dave.
Is that where you get down your local disco and we can show you moves?
Yeah.
A roller disco. Our loyal views, and we'll get billions on the repeat. We've got 16 viewers. If you want to drop in the chat, what was your best season of the 1980s? It'd be great to hear what your thoughts are. So I'll turn to you now, Gareth. You put together this behemoth, this great decade, my favourite decade in many ways. What did you think from talking to everyone and your feeling about what you think the best season was?
So I think because of the way it ended, 80-81, just the euphoria of winning the FA Cup. And I think, I spoke to you about that 81 final, David. You're part of a generation that hadn't seen Spurs win an FA Cup for 14 years at that point. So you were probably used to your parents and uncles and that older generation harking back to the 60s and saying, well, this team hasn't done anything. But that was your win in 81. And I think if there was one moment I could go back to, and I was a baby in arms, I was 4 months old during the 81 Cup final. But if I could go back to be sentient for one Spurs moment in the 80s, it would be that one. But again, it's interesting looking back in hindsight that we talk about the 87 season being that bittersweet one. If Spurs end up beating Coventry, that season is undoubtedly the best season of the 80s. But that 80-81 season, you look back at the results, we lost 4 games on the spin in early December, including a home defeat to West Brom. We got stuffed up at Middlesbrough just before Christmas. If you'd asked anyone on the 20th of December, is this going to be the best season that you'll ever have as a Spurs fan? I think you'd been hard pushed to find anyone who would have thought that's how it would have panned out at that point. So, yeah, I think emotionally the 81 season is probably got to be up there. 84 must push it close again because of its conclusion. 86, 87, once you can take all the scar and the hurt and the pain away from that to look back on it, it must have been such a fun season throughout. So if you're going it from forward to the end, it probably was really, really great fun. It's just the conclusion that kills it. So it's almost the flip probably of that 80-81 season.
Interesting.
So
you'll be surprised to hear, Gibbo. I've got a different take on this. You'll be surprised to hear.
Yeah. By the way, I think all the answers that we've come up with between us, if you're going to ask Dave which was the best Spurs team of the 80s, you're going to tell me it was one of the other 2 seasons when Spurs were a better team.
Yeah, so my favourite season was 81-82. Okay. And so we've won the cup. We go into that season as FA Cup winners. We've done it. We've done the FA Cup final. We've done the replay. We've got Aussie's Dream. We've got the Tottenham Party album that came out in the 81-82 season. Gibbo, check out Glenn Hoddle's rendition of Hey Jude. You're going to love it. All right. So we go into that season. And if you look at the Dutch Jive YouTube channel, which shows old Tottenham games, it's a really great channel. The bond that we had that night, May 1981, where we're singing, we're proud of you, the Stevie Archibalds, the We'll Take More Care of You, massive yellow flag at Wembley, going to school the next day. But we go into that season and we buy Ray Clements. Ray Clements, England's #1, right? And I remember, because it was announced tea time at the Old Trafford Test, that Ian Botham got his 118 against the Aussies, right? So there is Clements. And he's back in the day. Bloody hell, we've signed Ray Clements, right? We've signed Ray Clements. He makes.
How old was he then, Dave? Sorry to put in. How old was Clements?
I think he was early 30s. Yeah, because I was doing some research around that season for something else, and I thought that he was older than Pat Jennings when we signed him, but he wasn't. He's about 1 or 2 years younger. He was the Pat Jennings replacement, right? And the impact that 81-82 team was the first time that we'd had a tight defence since I've watched them. I know that Tottenham are not known for having a tight defence. He bought Paul Price as well, and Roberts and Miller were fantastic. And we were in for 4 competitions, right? Yeah. So we go to my first ever Charity Shield. We're going as FA Cup winners, and we had a team that was fantastic in the cups. And I think we finished 3rd that season. But there was the winter of 81-82 was the worst winter for snow in years. So we had loads and loads of games in the back end of the season. We got done by Barcelona in the semi-finals of the Cup Winners' Cup. We finished 4th, and then basically we had a really strong team. And the fact that exactly right. Good evening, Connor's dad. Yeah. And basically we played great football, and we also had a bit of squad. We had depth as well. Mark Falco that season. he really kind of shone as well. Archie and Crooksy got some injuries as well. And then, of course, most importantly, that May top of the pops, 1982, where you had Archibald with the Scotland squad, Hoddle and Clem with the England squad, and then the boys coming together for Tottenham. You know, we dominated.
Don't get no better than that.
And Madness were number one with our house, and when we staggered over the line to get that FA Cup. But that season, first season that we were properly good. Played great football. The Liverpool League Cup defeat still guts me, not as much as Coventry, but I just felt that we were a proper force that season, not just a cup team.
A proper force that won absolutely nothing.
Oh,
they did win the FA Cup. They did win the FA Cup. Sorry, Dave.
Better than losing. And then and you know who's in goal for QPR? Peter Hucker, apparently the Oxford keeper who let Hoddle usher in that goal. I was there for Hoddle's goal. He didn't look like he was letting. He sold him a dummy. And absolutely right here from Connor's dad, an unsung hero. And is this covered much in the book about Tony Galvin, Gareth?
Yes, very much so. Because everyone says much the same about him. He's such an unsung hero. He was so important to the balance of that midfield, which is, Hoddle, Villa and Ardiles want the ball all the time, and you drop Hazard in there and he wants to do the same as well. And although Galvin plays on the wing, actually he's really important just to knit everything together and to provide that balance to allow those other three to go and do what they did. And Galvin it is who... It sounds like it's a Tom Carroll style assist to Gareth Bale against West Ham, but Galvin it is who gives the ball to Ricky Villa. But Galvin does break from the edge of his own penalty area after Roberts' tackle. So he's an enabler, and he is one of those players, a bit like Paul Allen. I think he's the other unsung hero at the back end of the decade as an enabler. And every great Spurs team, in fact, every great team has a player like that in there who quite often are the unsung heroes.
And I can always remember the people who I went to football with told me that like Hoddle and Galvin had it was telepathic.
And Crooks as well. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, Galvin scored 2 goals against Feyenoord in the 83-84 game. There were 4 Hoddle assists. The game that they say that was the best 45 minutes they'd ever seen from anyone, let alone from Hoddle. Yeah. And he set up 4 goals, but one of them is a sort of classic Hoddle clipped pass about 50 yards, which Galvin runs onto and slots away. So it makes sense that the two of them had such a good understanding and a relationship.
And where did we sign him from, Dave? Where did we sign Galvin from?
Galltown,
yeah. Well, both him and Robert signed from non-league. Imagine the outrage now if Spurs went and signed 2 players from non-league. And
Roberts was Weymouth, wasn't he?
First team, yeah. It was both of them. Bill Nicholson had come back as scout, which Birkinshaw had really insisted on.
Yeah, just very true.
Completely different nowadays, isn't it? But yeah.
So Tony, the thing about Tony, the fun facts about Tony Galvin: 1, he never played with shin pads, and Souness put him out of the League Cup final, and he carried on playing. But Liverpool set out to nobble Galvin that day, especially Souness. 2, and he's always said about this, he's probably the only player to speak fluent Russian. He did a Russian degree at university. Everyone trots that one out. And then the third fun fact about Tony Galvin: he got sent off against West Bromwich Albion in the League Cup semi-final, 81-82. Gibbo, who was the West Brom player that was sent off that day?
Martin Yole.
Very good, Gibbo. Very good indeed.
There's footage of that as well.
Yeah, it's on Dutch Eyes. Yeah. So there we go. Now, let us move on in the finest tradition to finish off in grumpy old Spurs fashion, because, of course, we are grumpy and we're old, and we're talking about the 80s. The worst season. So, Gibbo, you have a think about it for a minute. I'm going to go to Gareth first. So, in terms of the book and the worst season, there are some, how we call this, lost seasons that no one really talks about. Over to you, Gareth, in that regard.
Yeah, so the lost seasons are 82-83 is a bit of a lost one, but I think it's partly because it's just in between the double FA Cup win and the UEFA Cup win. We were a good team in 82-83, but I think compared to what had come before it and what came after it, it's often forgotten about. 85-86 is a bit of a lost season for English football as a whole, and that's one of the themes that I bring out in the book about what's going on in in the wider ecosystem, it was the really horrific year for English football. But undoubtedly, the worst year for Spurs is the 87-88 season. It's the season that Venables comes in and takes over from Pleat quite early on in the season, and Spurs were. Well, again, by 90s standards, 87-88 is kind of all right, but it was a real eye-opener into what a world of complete mediocrity must look like, that it really felt like the Spurs are just going through the motions and finished 13th in the end. So my first real knowledge and understanding of Spurs was getting the sticker album at the start of the following season, and we're on the fact file, and it said where the teams finished last year, and it had Spurs as 13th. So that's quite deep rooted in me, that 13th for Spurs for me is quite par. I mean, obviously it's different for you guys because they were much better at this point when you started following them in your respective Spurs journeys. But for me, that always stands out. That season, it just felt so mediocre. Looking back at the results and the complete lack of goals, and there's a number of reasons for it. I think as you find out, and this is worth remembering when we get grumpy about current day Spurs, that whereas you need enablers like Galvin and Paul Allen in your team, but sometimes you need those really mediocre seasons where actually there are the seeds of things that are being born in those times. You have to look really, really hard for them, I think, in 87-88. But you're starting to see Waddle sort of emerge into the play that he became the following year. I think he'd come out of the shell of out the shadow of Hoddle. You've got a number of younger players that Venables starting to integrate into the side, like Samways and Howells, who weren't quite their breakthrough seasons, but that experience they get that season in a no pressure season is probably really important. Maybe they wouldn't have got a chance if we'd either been fighting for a relegation or. But anyway, I'm trying to sugarcoat what was a really, really mediocre and dull season.
You're sounding a bit, You're sounding a bit fans forum about that season. But anyway, but that's a good call out, Gibbo. Come on.
I think like I've sort of said, Gareth saying, but really like the 80s, most of the 80s seasons for me are sort of like I've viewed them sort of like looking back through video and interviews and books and stuff like that. So it's like hard. And then I got into it like the 86-87 season, and the seasons after that, I sort of got into the players that Spurs signed, and when they were on telly, I'd watch them and I'd sort of follow the results. But it wasn't really till the 90s that I became sort of properly engaged. And so like I look at it and I think like what I find it quite difficult to pick a season which I think was the worst. I sort of like think to myself now, was 87 the best season and the worst season? Because it was the season I started supporting them. But I look back and they lost the cup final. And even though I was sort of like young and just sort of like at that moment, was that probably my first sort of like realization of losing a game of football and being like, even though it sort of lasted about 10 minutes, probably not even that, but losing that game of football and sort of having that feeling that the team you support and you've decided to support has lost the game. So I find that question quite difficult to answer. So I probably would say that because you sort of get the sort of like the feeling of supporting someone and this is what it feels like, and my team are playing in this big game, and sort of losing that, because I don't have any feelings about the other seasons really, Dave. But you could probably tell us what yours are. But yeah, so I find that question difficult to answer. I'm sort of like just more enjoy hearing about the things that happen, because just on another note, so the other seasons, obviously Dave will know, but Gareth, you'll know. After that, where did we finish in the league? The last couple of seasons of the 80s. So,
88-89, which is Venables' first full season. We finished 6th, having been bottom in November, and then you've got Waddle and Gaza really playing very, very well towards the back end of the season. Then 89-90, we finished 3rd. So that's the final chapter of Hot Shot Tottenham, and it was we were never in a chance of finishing any higher than 3rd. It's a really nice end to the season because we pipped Arsenal on the final day of the season to finish above them, which for me as a Spurs fan was the first time that I could remember that. First time I'd seen that happen. And then obviously the season after that, that's pretty much exactly the same team goes on and wins the FA Cup. So something's starting to build once Venables gets his feet under the table properly and he's able to bring through some of the really promising young players. And of course, Gascoigne coming in and then Lineker a real catalyst to that side. So you can see that things are starting to build as we go into the 90s, probably as they were as we start to go into the 80s, actually. I think the problem at the start of the 90s is because of everything that's been going on off the field with Scholar and with the PLC, that we're financially crippled and it's completely unsustainable because Gascoigne has to get sold and then Lineker goes and they don't get replaced by quality players. And then you've got all the chaos and the mayhem of the 90s that kicks in.
Do you think I don't want to steal your thunder, Dave. I don't know if you're going to say this or maybe it's a question to put to you. Do you think, like in our lifetimes, I mean, I was born in 78. Gareth, I take it you were
81. I was born
81. Yeah. Dave,
54 apparently. 1971.
Yeah. So would we say in our lifetime? Probably. When you look at it like that, is it like the 80s, our sort of in our life, most successful decade, would you say? The most enjoyable decade? What, in our lifetimes?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think I've said this in the first show. I mean, I went to Wembley 7 times in 14 months. Charity Shields, League Cups, Cup final replays, right? I was 10, 11 years old. Spoiled to get that. And that got me my sense of entitlement that I held for a number of years. And I got to see great players. I got to see us sign really good players who were available. We just go out and get them. Your Waddles, your Archibalds, your Crooks, and your Gascoignes, right? We were up against Man United and we beat them to it. Because apparently we bought a sunbed for Gaz's sister and that sealed the deal, right? So for me, yeah, the best decade for me is the 80s. I was just, if I'd have been a bit older and obviously less of a shitload of hooliganism, I'd have probably got to more away games. But I went to every game of the 81-82 Cup final runs, apart from Chelsea away. Even my dad drew the line at going to Chelsea away. I mean, he was as big a fan as me and my brother, right? So he loved it, and he went to see the double team. Yeah, so it was the greatest decade. I'm very honoured and privileged to watch such great players. I'm reading the book. When I get to read it, will bring back some really, really happy memories. To finish off very quickly, my worst season. So the missing seasons are, I think, as you said, Gareth, 82-83, because we didn't do the triple. We didn't win the cup 3 years running. But it was the after effects of the last season where we played so many games. We got loads of injuries and we only bought Gary Mabbutt because then we found out that we were in a load of debt because of the West Stand that we built. And that's when Scholar came in. Then also the 85-86 season, which was Shrew's second season, was a bit of a nothing season. Waddle started slowly. Paul Allen came in. In fact, he almost he had too many players and he didn't know what to do with them. Like Hoddle and Hazard couldn't play together and all that kind of stuff. And I think he lost the dressing room, Shreve, and then Paul Walsh is very dismissive about Peter Shreve as well. But most definitely the worst season, coming off the 4-5-1, the 49 goals and this, that and the other. And Venables comes in, Hoddle's left, we bought Johnny Method. Chris Fairclough, I think, came in. And going out to Port after being in an FA Cup final, a League Cup semi-final, finishing third, and your season's over when you lose to Port Vale and you've been lobbed. That's one of the troughs of the 80s, that whole Port Vale thing. And school next day, yet again, very tough. So I think we're going to wrap it up, Gibbo, unless there's any other questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, I did mention this to Gareth before, but just for the viewers, Gareth, we obviously had the 90s book, and now we've had the 80s book. Plans for what are your plans for the future with your Spurs nostalgia stuff, mate? What's where can people find you? What can we do to, obviously you do lots of research and stuff so that people who are interested anyway in in Spurs of the past and stuff like, or even people that want to learn about it, where can we find your stuff, mate? What have we got in store?
Yeah, no, thanks for the setup. So both my books are available to purchase. So Hot Shot Tottenham and Is Gascoigne Going to Have a Crack, which takes you straight into the 90s. So you can read Hot Shot Tottenham, then go straight into Is Gascoigne Going to Have a Crack. My creative output energy now, though, has gone into my new Nostalgia podcast, which I've launched very, very recently. So the podcast is also called Is Gascoigne Going to Have a Crack? It's there really to supplement the books, but in the first instance, I'm talking about the 90s. My episode 1, which landed last week, is an exclusive interview I had with Darren Anderton. So please go and check that out. They are completely timeless. So there are 109 podcasts out, that current Spurs podcasts that are out there on a weekly basis. And David, I know that you've spoken to Ian Podden and Podspur, who analyses all of those podcasts, and we worked out there's a bit of a gap in the market for pure nostalgia. So I'm not going to give any contemporary references whatsoever on the podcast, but it's a weekly show that will come out every Thursday. In season 1, which is now live through until Christmas, I'm focusing specifically on the 1989 to 1993 period. So there's a couple of ex-player interviews. So Darren Anderson, that one's out there. Eric Tortsvet, I've spoken to. Also spoke to him with Mike Lee from the Spurs show about the 91 Cup final. We've done some season reviews. I've got 89-90 with Theo Delaney coming out this week, and some thematic issues as well that we pick up. So Mihir Bose has spoken to me about working with Irving Scholar. Julie Welsh, brilliant Julie Welsh, who wrote the club biography, is going to do an episode with me looking at the Sugar Venables fallout, which is, I think, incredibly significant in Tottenham's modern history, that particular episode of Sugar versus Venables. So, yeah, you'll find that wherever you get your podcast from. So look at Is Gascoigne Going to Have a Crack? But, yeah, both book titles, Hot Shot Tottenham, Spurs in the 80s, and Is Gascoigne Going to Have a Crack? Spurs in the 90s. I can see the early 70s. There won't be as much footage of the 70s, so it'd be hard for me to find. But there is a really, really good book, also by my publishers, Pitch Publishing, by a guy called Samuel Rook. It's called Glory, Glory Gone, and it charts Spurs from the fallout of the Bill Nicholson era in the late 60s through the rebirth under Keith Birkinshaw. And really, my book, I guess, picks up from that moment onward. So do have a look at Glory, Glory Gone by Samuel Rook.
That's brilliant. I mean, me and Dave will be all over those pods, won't we, Dave? That's our bag, isn't it, mate? You know what I mean?
You mean another competitor? I mean, I think no. So what Gareth was saying is that there's 108 pods a week, and Connor is on 106 of them a week. He's not on tonight.
On a bad week, he's on 106 of them.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's something. But yeah, but I will point out that I'm not competition for anyone, because I'm not. I know obviously today we're talking nostalgia, but yeah, I've got no interest in terms of my podcast output in talking about modern day football. It is purely nostalgia based, and I know that Dave, I've signed you up to talk about one of the more nothing seasons of the 90s as well. So I'm going to tap into.
I'm there to do the nothing seasons.
Jason Dazelle, Alan Nilsson, David Kerslake, and
David Kerslake. Darren Caskey, or that, but where can we purchase the book, Gareth? Would you prefer that people go onto Amazon? Have you got your own? Is it better for you that if they want to purchase it, that they go to your website or anything like that? Or
and again, thanks for the setup. This does feel like that episode of Alan Partridge where he gets into asking whether there's any Alan Partridge tie and pin combinations. Yeah, you can buy them directly from me, and as you'll see over my shoulder, I do have them here in stock. So if you want to buy them direct from the author, I'm sure we can put my link into my website on the chat. Hot Shot Tottenham, I've sold my first batch of them, so I've ordered another lot, so they'll be in by the end of the week. You can also get them on Amazon. I can't necessarily compete in terms of Amazon's postage and packaging, particularly if you're overseas. So if you are watching this from overseas, maybe just check your sort of local or book shops or online stores. But yeah, certainly if you're in the UK, you can get them directly from me. And if you drop me an email as well, then I'll happily sign them if that's of any value to it. Is there an audio book of it? Kerry's just asked. No, there isn't an audio book of it. Apparently my publisher Yeah, I've asked them several times and they've said no, there's no plans for it. I'm sure that you, Gibbo, would happily narrate it though if Kerry asked you to.
Nobody wants this voice.
Country with that West Midlands twang over it.
Nobody wants this voice talking Tottenham, mate. They don't
think
want,
you're
once a
would be a
week
lot
for an
better.
hour's enough. Nobody's going to want 4 or 5 hours of it. Maybe Dave.
Your voice would be a lot better than my monotonal irony. Believe you me. Just a couple of things very quickly because we've got to go. The interview with Darren Anderson, there's a very interesting thing revealed about Alan Sugar in it that I never knew until I listened to it. So it's a really, really good interview. I've heard Darren interviewed on the Spurs show and other things, and they're really good interviews as well. So Gareth, about we should put smoke up the proverbial. You brought out some really interesting stuff that I didn't know about the club and Sugar at the time. So I heartily recommend it. I think that is all that we have. Just final finish off very, very quickly. Gibbo, you'll be pleased to know that when we did the Bodo Glimp instant reaction and my brother was in the chat, I asked him for feedback as to the show. This is my brother. Yeah. Had Connor's dad in the chat. He said that he watched the Bodo game and he couldn't be bothered to start a new TV show, so he decided to watch us. So we were the interim. So that's a compliment. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Our content is the interim.
And I know we want to get off, but obviously, Gareth, you've got no plans of doing anything in your pods on anything current or whatever. But if ever you are interested in coming and moaning about the current situation, we would happily have you on to talk about the current Tottenham team for an hour. If you want to come and get it all off your chest, mate, we'd love that.
No, thank you very much.
I'm very sorry. Obviously, not professionally doing this. It should be in the show set up on YouTube. There should be the links to the pod and also where you can get the book if I've done it correctly. Okay.
Thanks.
I'm trying to. This is what I've just put some. I'm trying to put some. I'll put the link that Gareth has given us. I'll put it in the comments and everything, so people to.
It's in the description as well.
Yeah, and we'll put it in our. I'll put it on the. I'll put it on our Twitter feed as well, Gareth. If you can,
of course,
give us that. We'll push it on there. But yeah, Gareth, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time out to come and talk to us. Obviously, as always, Dave, your recollections of all these things are absolutely fantastic. And for all the people who have joined us and got involved in the comments, thank you very much. I think all that's left to say, as always, is come on, you Spurs.
Come on.